Commander Kang Ho felt his heart sink as he stared at the massive holographic display floating in front of him. 12 entire star sectors were now just empty black space on the map. Where millions of planets once orbited their suns, where countless civilizations had built their homes and raised their children, there was nothing left but cold darkness. The Devourers had struck again. Just 6 hours ago, the Altarian homeworld had been broadcasting normal civilian traffic. Cargo ships moving between their 3 moons, children playing in floating gardens above their crystal cities, scientists working on their latest discoveries. Now it was all gone. Completely gone. Not even debris remained where their planet used. To be Admiral Yun Seo's voice crackled through the communication system, reaching every ship in what remained of the once mighty Galactic Coalition fleet. Her words were calm, but everyone could hear the defeat underneath. All Coalition vessels, this is Admiral Yun Seo. Execute retreat pattern Delta 7. Fall back to the Outer Rim territories immediately. The bridge of the human ship Defiance was unusually quiet. Captain Minho stood with his arms crossed, watching the tactical display where red dots showed the Devourer forces moving closer. His jaw was tight with anger and frustration. "Sir, the Vorthan Empire's entire battle group is gone," he reported to Commander Kang Ho. "All 200 of their heavy cruisers, their quantum cannons that could crack moons in half, their shield generators that could protect entire cities, their AI combat systems that could predict enemy moves 3 steps ahead. None of it mattered. Those things just swept through them, like they were made of paper. Around the command center, alien representatives from different Coalition species looked like they had already given up. The tall, crystal-like beings from Zerion Prime stood perfectly still, their usually bright inner light now dim with despair. These creatures had fought wars for thousands of years and won every single one. But now their confidence was completely shattered. The insectoid hive queens clustered together, their normally organized formations now scattered and confused. Each queen controlled millions of warrior drones back on their homeworlds, but even their vast armies couldn't stop what was coming. Their clicking sounds, which usually carried commands and strategies, now just sounded like frightened whispers. General So Young sat at her workstation, scrolling through endless evacuation plans and emergency protocols. Her fingers moved quickly across the controls, but her expression showed she knew the truth. There weren't enough ships to save everyone. There wasn't enough time to move entire populations. The math was simple and terrible. Lieutenant He Jin monitored the long-range sensors from her position near the back of the bridge. The display in front of her showed space itself, seeming to bend and twist as something massive approached. "Commander, I'm picking up gravitational distortions in sectors 7 through 9. They're moving faster than our predictions." The Devourers weren't just destroying planets and stars. They were consuming reality itself, leaving behind regions of space where the normal laws of physics didn't seem to work anymore. Ships that entered those areas simply vanished, not destroyed but somehow erased from existence entirely. Colonel Jae Hyun walked over to Commander Kang Ho, holding a data pad with incoming messages from Coalition Command. His voice was grim and tired. "Sir, they're asking us to help with civilian transport operations. They want our cargo ships to help evacuate the outer colonies." He paused and shook his head with bitter amusement. "They still think we're just another minor species with a few cargo ships and maybe some outdated weapons. They're treating us like we're the new kids who should just stay out of the way while the adults handle the real fighting." Commander Kang Ho looked around at his crew. These humans had joined the Galactic Coalition only 50 years ago, when Earth finally developed faster-than-light travel. Every other species in the Coalition had been traveling between stars for thousands of years. The aliens had better technology, bigger ships, more advanced weapons, and centuries of military experience. But those same aliens were now running away in panic from an enemy they couldn't understand or fight. The Coalition had made this mistake before. When humans first applied to join, the alien species had laughed at Earth's primitive weapons and small fleet. They thought humans would be useful only for basic labor and simple support roles. They had no idea what humans were really capable. Cave when pushed to their limits. Looking at the retreating alien fleets on his display, Commander Kang Ho realized they were about to make that same mistake again. And this time, that mistake might cost them everything. While the tall crystalline beings from Xerion Prime worked frantically on their advanced computers, calculating the fastest escape routes to the far edges of the galaxy, Captain Su-min and her team were doing something completely different. Instead of planning how to run away, they were studying their enemy. The Human Research Center on Lunar Base had been running non-stop for 3 straight days. Dr. Tae Yang hadn't slept in over 72 hours, surviving on nothing but coffee and determination. His team of analysts surrounded him, their workstations covered with holographic displays showing battle recordings, energy readings, and tactical data from every single Devourer attack in recorded history. "There has to be something," Dr. Tae Yang muttered to himself, rubbing his tired eyes. "No enemy is completely unstoppable. There's always a weakness, always a pattern." The other coalition species thought the humans were wasting precious time. While entire civilizations were packing up their most important people and fleeing to distant safe zones, Earth's military was doing what everyone else considered pointless research. Sergeant Jin Woo had been reviewing combat footage for days, watching the same battles over and over again. His eyes were bloodshot, but suddenly he sat up straight in his chair. "Dr. Tae Yang, sir, I think I've found something." The entire research team gathered around Jin Woo's workstation. On his screen, battle recordings from 12 different encounters, played side by side. Each showed the same terrifying pattern. Devourer forces would appear, overwhelm the defending fleets within hours, consume everything in the system, then move on to the next target. "Look at the timing," Jin Woo said, pointing at the data streams. "Every single battle follows the same schedule. They attack with massive force, expect immediate surrender or quick victory, then consume and leave. They've never had to fight a prolonged battle." Dr. Tae Yang leaned closer, his scientist's mind racing. "You're right. They're like a flash flood, devastating but fast-moving. What happens when a flash flood hits something that won't move?" "It has to find another way around," Jin Woo replied with growing excitement. The data was clear once they knew what to look for. The Devourers had conquered hundreds of star systems, but they had never faced an enemy that could withstand their initial assault and keep fighting. Every civilization they'd encountered either fled immediately or was destroyed within the first few hours of contact. General Boram arrived at the research center just as Dr. Tae Yang was preparing his report. She was followed by her tactical staff, including Major Eugene, who carried detailed star charts of human space under his arm. "What do you have for us, Doctor?" General Boram asked, her voice sharp with urgency. Dr. Tae Yang activated the main display, showing the Devourer attack patterns in bright red lines across the galaxy. "They're predictable, General. They hit hard and fast, expecting quick victories. But look at this." He highlighted several systems where the battles had lasted longer than usual. In each case, the Devourers had shown signs of confusion and had taken longer to fully consume the target. "They don't know how to handle sustained resistance, Doctor," Tae Yang explained. "Their entire strategy depends on psychological warfare and rapid victory." Major Eugene spread out the star charts on the conference table. The map showed human colonial space, with dozens of planets, mining stations, and military outposts scattered across several light years. "If we're going to make a stand, it has to be here," Eugene said, pointing to a cluster of human colonies near Earth. "The Terran defense line. These systems are connected by natural hyperspace corridors. If we fortify these choke points, we can force them to come at us exactly where we want them." The plan was insane by every standard military doctrine in the galaxy. Instead of evacuating or retreating to safer territory, the humans wanted to deliberately place themselves in the path of an unstoppable enemy force. General Boram studied the charts carefully. "We'd be outnumbered 1,000 to 1. Our weapons are generations behind coalition standard. Our ships are smaller and slower." "But we'd be fighting on our terms," Major Eugene replied. "Every human outpost, every mining station, every colonial world becomes a fortress. We make them fight for every meter of space." News of the human plans spread quickly through the coalition command structure. Within hours, alien observers were arriving at Lunar Base to witness what they assumed would be humanity's final strategic meeting. Ambassador Veltar of Xerion Prime was the first to arrive. His crystalline body sparkled with agitation as he processed. the human battle plans. When he spoke, his voice carried the harmonic tones of his species' ancient wisdom. "Are you propose to fight them directly?" he asked, his crystal appendages clicking together in dismay. Every advanced civilization has tried this approach. The Vorthon Empire had quantum cannons that could destroy small moons. The Altarian defense. Force had energy shields that could protect entire planets. The Zephyrian Collective had AI battle computers that could predict enemy movements with perfect accuracy. He paused, his inner light flickering with what humans recognized as fear. They all failed. They all died. Some of these civilizations had been fighting wars for 10,000 years. What makes you think you can succeed where they could not, Colonel C? Fyonji had been listening quietly from the back of the room. Now she stepped forward, her expression calm but determined. When she spoke, her voice carried the quiet confidence that had carried humanity through countless impossible situations throughout their history. "Every advanced civilization isn't human," she said simply. The room fell silent. The alien observers looked confused, not understanding what made humans different from any other species in the galaxy. But the humans in the room understood perfectly. They knew something about themselves that the rest of the galaxy was about, so to learn. The attack began exactly as predicted. Dark shapes emerged from the twisted space between stars, moving like living shadows toward the outer human colonies. The Devourers had chosen their first target carefully, Mining Station Omega-7, a small outpost with just 43 people aboard. Lieutenant Commander Ji-hoon watched the approaching enemy fleet through the station's cracked viewports. His hands were steady as he checked his sidearm one more time. Even though he knew conventional weapons were useless against these creatures, the station's defensive systems were already failing, sparks flying from damaged control panels all around the command center. According to every military expert in the galaxy, Omega-7 should have been consumed within 10 minutes of first contact. The Devourers had destroyed much larger and better defended positions in less time, but something unexpected was happening. "Station Omega-7 to Fleet Command." Ji-hoon's voice crackled through the communication system, filled with static, but still clear. "We've lost life support to sections 3 through 7, and the main reactor is running at 30% power. But we're still here." 6 hours had passed since the first attack. The mining station should have been empty space by now, but Ji-hoon's voice kept coming through the radio, delivering tactical updates like he was reporting routine maintenance issues. "Sergeant Na Young has rigged all the mining charges to detonate. If those things try to board us again," Ji-hoon continued, his voice matter-of-fact despite the chaos around him, "we've welded the blast doors shut and turned the ore processing center into a choke point. If they want this station, they're going to have to work for it." The Devourers circled the small station like predators, confused by prey that refused to die. They had never encountered resistance that lasted more than a few minutes. Their usual strategy of overwhelming force followed by quick consumption wasn't working. Meanwhile, on New Sol Colony, Captain Dong-hyun was preparing for the next wave of attacks. The colonial world had originally been a peaceful farming community, with about 12,000 residents. Most were families who had left Earth to start new lives growing food for the expanding human settlements. But when the Devourer scouts arrived, expecting to find helpless civilians running in panic, they discovered something entirely different. Every farmhouse had been turned into a small fortress. The colonists had torn up their crop fields to create defensive trenches and barriers. The community center, originally built for town meetings and harvest festivals, now served as a command bunker filled with improvised weapons and communication equipment. "They're using mining equipment as weapons," Captain Dong-hyun reported to Fleet Command, watching through his binoculars as colonists operated massive industrial drilling machines like artillery pieces. Old Man Park has turned his grain harvester into a mobile weapons platform. Mrs. Lee is commanding a squad of teenagers armed with plasma welders. The scene was almost surreal. Grandmothers who had spent their lives growing vegetables were now manning defensive positions alongside their grandchildren. Farmers who had never held anything more dangerous than a shovel were now coordinating military tactics with the skill of veteran soldiers. "Sir, the Devourers seem confused," reported his communications officer. "Their attack patterns are becoming erratic. They keep retreating and regrouping like they're trying to figure out a new strategy. From his position aboard the command, ship Brilliance, Admiral Inho monitored the battles across 12 different human outposts. His tactical display showed what should have been impossible. Every single defensive position was still active and fighting. "Fleet command to all units," Admiral Inho announced over the general communication channel. "Status report from all defensive positions." The responses came in one after another, each more remarkable than the last. "Mining platform Delta 5 still operational. We've lost our main habitat domes, but we're fighting from the maintenance tunnels. Research station." Kepler 9 reporting. "Half our staff is wounded, but we've turned the laboratory into a weapons factory. Dr. Kim has figured out how to turn the particle accelerator into a defensive weapon. Freight depot Gamma 12 here. We're down to emergency power, but we've turned the cargo containers into a maze. Every time those things try to enter, we lead them into dead ends and ambush them." Admiral Inho stared at his displays in amazement. "They're not breaking," he reported to Coalition Command. "Every position that should have fallen hours ago is still fighting. Some are getting stronger." The Devourer collective consciousness was experiencing something it had never encountered in thousands of years of conquest: confusion. These creatures had evolved to feed on despair and the collapse of organized resistance. They expected their prey to either flee in terror or surrender quickly when faced with overwhelming odds. But humans were doing neither. Instead, they were adapting. When their high-tech weapons failed, they used industrial tools. When their defensive positions were destroyed, they created new ones from debris. When their numbers were reduced, the survivors fought harder instead of giving up. On Freight Station Echo 3, Chief Engineer Kyung Ho had turned the entire facility into a giant trap. "We've vented atmosphere from the outer sections and filled them with explosive gas," he reported calmly. "When those things try to board us, we'll turn the whole station into a bomb." The Devourers paused their attacks, their collective mind struggling to process this unexpected behavior. In every previous conquest, resistance had followed predictable patterns. Fear led to desperation, desperation led to mistakes, and mistakes led to quick defeat. But these humans seemed to become more dangerous as their situation became more hopeless. The worse things got, the more creative and stubborn they became. "Sir," reported the communications officer aboard Admiral Inho's ship, "we're receiving a message from Lieutenant Commander Ji-hoon on Omega 7. Ji-hoon's voice came through clearly despite the ongoing battle around his station. "Fleet Command, this is Omega 7. We're still here, and we're not going anywhere. Tell the fleet that if a bunch of miners and engineers can hold off these things for 6 hours, then we can hold them off for 6 more. The message was broadcast across all human frequencies, and similar responses came from every defensive position. The Devourers had expected to consume the outer colonies within hours and move on to larger targets. Instead, they found themselves bogged down in prolonged battles with an enemy that refused to accept defeat. For the first time in their existence, the Devourers began to doubt their own invincibility. The breakthrough came at the worst possible moment. Haven Station was under its third major assault in 12 hours, and Dr. Sunwoo was trapped in the research lab while explosions shook the walls around her. Emergency lights flickered on and off, casting strange shadows across her workstation, where she had been analyzing energy readings from the Devourer attacks. Her hands moved quickly across the damaged controls, trying to save her data before the next wave hit. That's when she noticed something that made her heart race with excitement rather than fear. "General Wu Jin, are you receiving this?" Dr. Sun Wu called over the communication system, her voice cutting through the sounds of battle. "I think I've figured out what these things really are." General Wu Jin's voice came back immediately, strained but focused. "Go ahead, Doctor. We need anything you can give us." Dr. Sun Wu pulled up her research on the main display, even as another explosion rocked the station. "Sir, they're not just consuming matter and energy like we thought. Look at these readings from every battle we've fought. The data showed something incredible. Every time human forces had been on the verge of complete defeat, the Devourer energy signatures had actually grown stronger. But whenever humans continued fighting despite impossible odds, those same energy readings became unstable. "They're feeding on psychological collapse," Dr. Sunwoo explained, her scientific excitement overriding her fear. They're parasites that need their prey to give up hope. The moment when a species surrenders, when they lose the will to fight, that's when the devourers become strongest. The revelation hit General Wu Jin like a lightning bolt. "Doctor, are you telling me that these things get weaker when we keep fighting?" "Exactly. That's why they've never faced sustained resistance before. Every other species eventually reached a breaking point where they gave up, but we haven't broken yet." Across the asteroid belt, Major Chang Min was coordinating the defense of 17 different mining installations. His command post was built inside a hollowed-out asteroid, surrounded by defensive weapons cobbled together from mining equipment and spare ship parts. "General Chang Min here," his voice crackled over the communication network. "Dr. Sun Wu is right. Look at my sensor readings." Chang Min highlighted the energy signatures of the devourer forces attacking his position. The readings showed something that should have been impossible. The enemy was getting weaker as the battle continued. "Every time we should have surrendered, we didn't," Chang Min reported, pointing to his tactical display. "And look, their energy readings are fluctuating, getting more unstable with each hour we hold out." The pattern was clear once they knew what to look for. The devourers had evolved over millions of years to break their prey's will to fight. They were psychological predators as much as physical ones. Their entire strategy depended on creating hopelessness and despair in their enemies. But humans were different. Earth's history was filled with stories of people who fought harder when things looked hopeless. From ancient warriors defending their cities against impossible odds to modern soldiers holding positions that should have been overrun, humanity had always produced individuals who simply refused to give up. This wasn't just stubbornness, it was evolution. Humans had survived ice ages that should have killed them, recovered from plagues that destroyed entire civilizations, and rebuilt after wars that left their world in ruins. Over hundreds of thousands of years, the humans who survived were the ones who kept fighting when everyone else had given up. "All stations, this is Lieutenant Colonel Kyung Suk at Terran Command," a strong female voice announced across all human communication frequencies. Her words were broadcast to every human, outpost, ship, and defensive position in the battle zone. "I want everyone to listen carefully. We've just learned something important about our enemy. These things feed on our despair. They get stronger when we lose hope, and weaker when we keep fighting." Her voice grew stronger, filled with the kind of determination that had carried humanity through countless dark periods in their history. "But here's what they don't understand about us. We don't know how to quit. Not when our families are at stake, not when our homes are threatened, not when the survival of our species depends on us holding the line." Lieutenant Colonel Kyung Suk paused, letting her words sink in across the communication network. "So I want everyone out there to show these things what that means. Show them what happens when they attack a species that has survived everything the universe could throw at them and came back stronger every time." The response was immediate and overwhelming. From every impossible defensive position across human space, voices began responding with defiant acknowledgement. "Mining Station Omega-7 here. We're down to our last life support unit, but we're still fighting. New Sol Colony reporting. Half our buildings are gone, but we've turned the rubble into new defensive positions. Research Outpost Delta 9. Checking in. Our main lab is destroyed, but we've figured out how to turn our emergency beacon into a weapon." The messages kept coming, each one more determined than the last. Humans who should have been dead were still fighting. Positions that should have been overrun were still holding. People who had every reason to give up were instead finding new ways to resist. Dr. Sun Wu monitored the devourer energy readings from her damaged lab and watched something unprecedented happen. For the first time in their existence, the devourers were actually getting weaker during a battle instead of stronger. "Their collective consciousness is destabilizing," she reported in amazement. "They don't know how to handle prey that won't break." Major Chang Min coordinated a counterattack from his asteroid command post, using mining ships as improvised warships. "They're retreating from Sector 7, he announced with surprise. Actual retreat, not repositioning for another attack. The psychological warfare that had worked for the devourers across thousands of conquered worlds was backfiring against humanity. Instead of breaking human spirits, each attack was making them more determined. Instead of creating despair, the Devourers were discovering what humans did when cornered. They fought back with everything they had. "This is General Wu Jin to all human forces," came the announcement. "The enemy is weakening. I repeat, the enemy is showing signs of weakness. Continue resistance. Do not give them the psychological victory they need." Across the defense network, humans who had been fighting for their lives suddenly realized they weren't just surviving, they were winning. The Devourers decided to end the war with one massive final assault. They gathered their strongest forces and aimed them directly at Lunar Base, humanity's main military command center on Earth's moon. If they could break the humans' primary stronghold, the psychological victory would shatter human resistance across the entire galaxy. Commander Seok Jin stood in the main control room of Lunar Base, watching the largest enemy fleet anyone had ever seen approaching through space. The base's sensors showed thousands of Devourer ships, each one capable of destroying entire cities. His defense force consisted of exactly 50 people, soldiers, technicians, and scientists who had volunteered to stay behind when evacuation was offered. "Sir, they're coming in from all directions," reported his communications officer, trying to keep her voice steady. "We count over 3,000 enemy vessels. Our defensive systems can maybe handle 30 or 40. Commander Seok Jin nodded calmly, checking his weapon one more time. "Then we'll have to make every shot count." The first wave hit Lunar Base like a tsunami of dark energy. The outer defensive shields collapsed within minutes. The main power generators overloaded and exploded, plunging half the base into darkness. The landing bays were torn open, exposing sections of the facility to the vacuum of space. Any reasonable military commander would have surrendered at that point. The battle was mathematically impossible to win, but Commander Seok Jin wasn't thinking about mathematics. He was thinking about his daughter back on Earth, about the small farming colonies scattered across human space, and about the simple fact that someone had to hold the line. "All sections, this is Commander Seok Jin," he announced over the base's internal communications system. "We're going to make these things work for every meter of this base. Engineering, vent the atmosphere from sections 1 through 5 and turn them into vacuum traps. Medical, your surgical lasers can be recalibrated. As weapons, Science Division, I want those particle accelerators turned into defensive guns." Hour after hour the battle raged. The Devourers poured into Lunar Base expecting to find broken defenders ready to surrender. Instead, they found humans who had turned every corridor into a trap, every room into a fortress, and every piece of equipment into a weapon. When the main armory was destroyed, the defenders used maintenance tools as weapons. When their communication systems failed, they coordinated attacks using hand signals and written messages. When their advanced weapons ran out of power, they fought with whatever they could find. 14 hours into what should have been a 10-minute battle, Commander Seok Jin's voice was still coming through the communication systems, giving tactical updates like he was reporting routine maintenance issues. "Lunar Base to all human forces," he transmitted, his voice hoarse but determined. "We've lost main power to levels 6 through 10, and the East Wing is completely gone. But we're still here and we're still fighting." Across the galaxy, Coalition observers watched in complete bewilderment. The crystalline beings from Zerion Prime had calculated that Lunar Base should have fallen within the first hour of the assault. Their advanced computers couldn't process what they were seeing. "This is impossible," transmitted Ambassador Veltar, his crystalline body flickering with confusion. "They should have been consumed hours ago. Their base is barely functional, their numbers are insignificant, and they're using primitive weapons against an overwhelming force." Captain Han Sol was coordinating counterattacks from his position at Mars orbital stations, watching the battle through long-range sensors. When he heard the alien ambassador's transmission, he couldn't help but smile grimly. "You don't understand humans very well," he replied simply. "We're not fighting because we think we can win. We're fighting because it's what we do." The truth was becoming clear to everyone watching the battle. This wasn't about military strategy or superior technology. This was about something much more fundamental: the human refusal to accept defeat, even when defeat seemed certain. Dr. Young-Soo had been analyzing the battle data from his laboratory on Mars. As the hours passed and lunar base continued to hold out, his readings showed something remarkable happening to the Devourer forces. "General Ga Young, you need to see this," Dr. Young-Soo called over the communication system. "The Devourers are parasitic entities that require psychological surrender to complete their consumption process. They literally feed on the moment when their prey gives up hope." He highlighted the energy readings on his display, showing how the Devourer forces were becoming more unstable with each hour that lunar base continued to resist. Humanity's absolute refusal to accept defeat is starving them. They don't know how to complete their feeding process when their prey won't break. The revelation spread quickly through human command networks. The Devourers weren't just being slowed down by human resistance, they were being weakened by it. Every hour that humans continued fighting was another hour that the enemy couldn't complete their victory and move on to the next target. As the battle entered its 15th hour, something unprecedented began to happen. The massive Devourer fleet surrounding lunar base started to fragment. Individual ships began pulling away from the assault, their formations becoming disorganized and confused. Commander Seok Jin, fighting from what remained of the base's command center, noticed the change. Immediately, "All stations, enemy forces are showing signs of retreat. I repeat, the enemy is pulling back." The psychological predators that had conquered hundreds of star systems were experiencing something they had never encountered before. Prey that somehow became stronger when faced with impossible odds. General Ga Young, monitoring the battle from Terran Defense Command, realized that the tide had turned. She opened communication channels to every coalition force in the galaxy. "This is Terran Defense Command to all coalition forces," she announced, her voice carrying across star systems. "The line holds. Repeat, the line holds." The simple message carried more meaning than any complex military report could have conveyed. Against all odds, against overwhelming force, against an enemy that had never been defeated, humanity had stood its ground and refused to break. The Devourer swarm, faced with prey that somehow grew stronger through adversity, began a full retreat. They pulled back from human space, from the outer colonies, from the asteroid belt installations, seeking easier targets among the stars where the prey would break when it was supposed to. In the aftermath of the battle, as coalition species cautiously returned to rebuild their shattered worlds, they carried with them a new understanding of their newest members. The humans had taught the galaxy's oldest and most advanced civilizations a lesson about the power of simply refusing to give up. Sometimes the most primitive response, standing your ground and fighting when everything seems hopeless, was also the most effective. The Devourers had learned what humanity's enemies throughout history had discovered. You can defeat human armies, destroy human cities, and overwhelm human fleets, but you cannot break the human spirit. The galaxy was safe, not because of advanced technology or superior strategy, but because 50 humans on a moon base had simply refused to quit.